Today I want to talk about Jordan Peterson's most underrated advice, which seems to be heavily inspired by Carl Jung and Nietzsche in particular.
All of these things are very difficult to stand up straight, to remember that, and to treat yourself like you're someone worthwhile, and to make friends with people who are good for you, and to tell the truth, or at least not to lie. I mean, these are all ideals. The central figure of Western culture is Christ. And we can look at that psychologically, because Christ is the dying and resurrecting hero. And what does that mean psychologically? Well, it means that you learn things painfully. And when you learn something painfully, a part of you has to die. That's the pain. You know, when a dream is shattered, for example, a huge part of you that constituted that dream, maybe even the biological substrate of that dream, has to be stripped away and burned. And so, life is a constant process of death and rebirth. And to participate in that fully is to allow yourself to be redeemed by it.
So what does that mean, to be redeemed by it? Life is a constant process of death and rebirth. This is what redeems us, makes us stronger, wiser, kinder in many circumstances, more empathetic, better overall. The death and rebirth represented by the phoenix and scarab, Odin hung from the world tree, Christ from the cross. This is what we do, in a microcosmic sense, when we step into the testing and refining fire. And we face many of these fires in life, involuntarily, ideally, of course. For example, in training for a fight or weightlifting competition, you're breaking down and burning away your weak muscles, which are replaced by stronger ones. This is death and rebirth. It's meaningful pain. As you spar, you're doing something similar with your brain and your mind. Your muscle memory and technique is tested in a trial by fire. Your weak strikes, footwork, submission chains, and other tactics are burned away and replaced by something new, and better if you adjust correctly. Again, this is death and rebirth, meaningful pain.
And so the good is that process of death and rebirth, voluntarily undertaken. It's like you're not as good as you could be, so you let that part of you die. And if someone comes along and says, you know, there's some dead wood here, man, it needs to be burned off. You think, well, that stuff's still a bit alive. When that burns, it's going to hurt. It's like, yeah, well, no kidding. But maybe the thing that emerges in its place is something better. And I think this is the secret of human beings. This is what we're like, you know, unlike any other creature, is that we can let our old selves die and let our new selves be born. And that's what we should do. And so, where do I fall short in these 12 rules? Well, endlessly. Because, well, here's a way of thinking about it. Until the entire world is redeemed, we all fall short.
This advice applied would help remedy a lot of the problems we have in Western society today. I'm talking about America predominantly because I'm from America, including obesity and many health problems that come with that, the rise in single-parent households and high divorce rates relative to past decades, mental health issues, which are prevalent in the United States, the problem of the majority of Americans living from paycheck to paycheck, outrageous amounts of debt, that's a huge problem as well, which keeps many Americans enslaved to the system. The rampant addiction to porn and the psychological issues arising from that. The rise of incels, which stands for involuntary celibate, if you didn't know. A group of young men predominantly who believe that they are unable to find a romantic or sexual partner despite their desire to do so. The best chance we have at correcting these issues begins at the level of the individual, where we pursue this process of death and rebirth, throwing ourselves into the furnace of life's most heroic challenges to be melted down and purified like gold, emerging like the phoenix or the alchemical king from the fire after being consumed by the dark wolf representing the Negretto phase or the shadow, the abyss. If we gaze into the abyss, integrate the shadow, dive deep into the depths of the lake and cave of the unconscious mind like Beowulf, we'll find our greatest weapon, Beowulf found the giant sword that he used to slay Grendel's mother. And similarly, we'll find our own Excalibur, the integration of conscious and unconscious, the balance of masculine and feminine, order and chaos, the transformative power of the integrated psyche, the self, the logos, and at the highest level, the Christ.
There's more to us than there is to the horror. As nature is, bent on our destruction, bad as culture is, tyrannical and bloody, back as far as you can look, as malevolent as you are in the darkest part of your heart, and that's plenty malevolent. The possibility that's within you that can well up, the courage and the truth and the ability and the skill and the willingness to set things right, if you are willing to set them right, is more powerful than all of that. And so it's so interesting. It was proof for me of an old saying I read from Carl Jung. It's an alchemical motif, in stir qualinus inventur, which is what you most want to be found will be found where you least want to look, essentially. And it's so interesting because it means that if you're willing to turn around and to stand up straight and face the darkness like fully, what you discover at the darkest part is the brightest light. And that's something that's so much worth discovering, because there's going to be terrible darkness in your life. And it's going to make you cynical and bitter. And it could easily be that you're just not looking at it enough. Because if you looked at it enough, and you didn't shy away, and you brought everything you had to bear on it, you'd find that there was more to you than there was to the horror. Drop what you're doing that's foolish, that you know is foolish, and pick an aim that's worthwhile, to make things better for yourself, like you're worth taking care of, like you're worth something, and to surround yourself with people who believe the same and who are rejoicing in your accomplishments and unhappy when you fail, right? And you're comparing yourself to your accomplishments of yesterday and not to someone else's today, so that you're not jealous and bitter. And you put your own house in order so that you're not cursing the world when some of its disarray might be your fault. And you're trying to pursue something meaningful, and you're doing your best to tell the truth and all of that. And then you see what happens. Who the hell are you? You think you're a miracle of some bloody, bizarre sort. We've been around for 3.5 billion years. Every single one of your relatives propagated successfully. And here you are, against all possible odds, in this world of hell in some sense, and bitterness and tyranny and malevolence. And yet, God only knows what's inside you, this capacity for consciousness, the capacity to confront potential and to turn it into something good. That's us, man. That's the Western story. That's the individual as the cornerstone of the state. That's our responsibility, and it really is who we are. And so we need to know that, and we need to remember it, and we need to act it out. And then maybe we can see what we can do about it, and see how good we could make things. And maybe that would be the purpose of your damn life, right? Not to be happy. It's like, there's problems to be solved. Be happy after you solve the goddamn things, right? So I learned, because I looked at dark things, that I learned that the light was more powerful than the darkness as far as I was concerned, and that people were capable, each of us, of remarkable things, and that we need to know that that's what we are. We're this consciousness that confronts potential with all its catastrophe. That's what we are. That's what makes us in the image of God. That's what gives us our intrinsic value. And that idea that we have intrinsic value, that's the bedrock presupposition of our state. We're going to question that, or we're going to live it out. Better to live it out. Find out who you are.